we're going to take you forward now with where you are at in terms of putting it all together. So we have a good understanding of the types of evaluation. We have a good idea of figuring out what we need to evaluate. What do we do to put it all together? And what's really essential is understanding what a logic model looks like, looking at a process that puts it all together. And we've got looks like we've advanced a little too much here. But what we really want to have is an understanding of how to put it all together. And the logic model is how we do that. So what we need to examine are the inputs and the outcomes, and this gives you an example here. And it really does show as well how the inputs and the outputs are more about measuring the process, which is what we've talked about. The outcomes are more about measuring the outcome indicators. And so that's how we put it all together in a logic model. And these are some examples. Here's a template that we included for you so you can start plugging in your own information. Another one that is more specific to an after-school program and shows you how you can plot in your activities, the short-term, the intermediate, and the longer end goal results. Okay. And this is another example of a logic model. This is just a text-based one, but it's a kind of a good place to start. It gets into a lot of the specifics. And there's a blank template for you. And this is another example of template. This one I've included because it also shows how, in addition to the outcomes and the indicators, you can and need to add in how you're going to do it, who is going to be responsible, and when it's going to be done for. And like anything, what gets measured gets done. And so that's what's really important to assign responsibility and timing to it. Okay, this is a much more extensive logic model. But what I did do is include at the very bottom some examples of what you may need to think about in each of those areas. And hopefully that will get you jump-started. Okay? The question is then what you also need to think about is how do you gather the data? And it's clear that there are a lot of different ways. And I think once you've gone through the logic model and you're very clear about what it is you want to evaluate, the data gathering methods will become clearer. And there's a lot of different ways to gather data. As you can see, here's just a sampling. You need to figure out what works best for what it is you're trying to gather and choose one. And normally, and this is what I always encourage people to do, is to use more than one kind of data gathering method. I think we tend to fall back on surveys a lot of times, but here's a list of some of the ones that I tend to use the most that I think get us where we need to go in terms of after-school programming. The ones that we kind of rely on the most, I think, are things like SurveyMonkey and Survey Gizmo. Now more people are using because it's Canadian as opposed to SurveyMonkey, which is American. I think ultimately one of the most important tools I use is 5 Whys and the what, so what, and now what. I mean, those are just important phrases to have in your toolkit. And recently, I've also been working with a number of groups and who are using photo voice, which is a great way of capturing data by having your stakeholders take photographs and putting them all together in a presentation. So I think that's really important as well. There's lots of others that you can find on the Campus for Communities.com website as well. Just Google or just search for evaluation, and a lot of tools will pop up. The one thing that I wanted to stress as well is that I know when I first started, evaluation was really intimidating for me anyway. This is an evaluation tool that a colleague of mine, Carol Peterson, developed. Excuse me. And this is one that she used for a summer playground program and had the children fill out. And what it really reinforced for me, that evaluation doesn't have to be complicated. She just had the kids circle what they had learned at the playground this summer. So again, a less extensive, but it still gathers important data. Pro had some ideas for here as well for how to gather information from children and youth in more simple ways. And again, these are resources. When you're at this point in the process, it's good to come back and take a look at the different kind of tools that you can use. there's a lot out there as well. We have access to one of the most powerful research tools in the history of the world, and that's Google. And so there's a lot of tools that are already out there, so don't reinvent the wheel. Here's one that is specifically developed to measure physical literacy. So you don't need to start from scratch. And a lot of times you'll need to adapt the tool and acknowledge the source, but it's a really good place to start. And this is more of what that looks like. So lots of information out there. Okay. Oops, I thought I had another one. Yeah, this one is from Play. Okay. So, the question I often get asked the most is really, how do you get started? And I think, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, we tend to oftentimes, and I know I was certainly guilty of this as well, leave evaluation to the very end. And what's really important is making sure that you address evaluation at the very beginning. And so here's a list of the ideal process. Now, of course, it may not always be ideal, but here's a map for getting started. And I think probably what's as important as anything on this list is that there needs to be an evaluation team. And I think a lot of times we left it up to one person, and we know that is not the ideal, that it really needs to involve the whole team from the beginning, so that there is consensus about what you're trying to change, what it is you're trying to measure. You have a different understanding, different lenses about what the purpose or the reasons, the audience for the evaluation. So it's important for you all to come together. There you go, and the rest of the steps are things that we've talked about. What kind of evaluation, how to build the logic model, to actually build it, to decide what you're going to use to gather your data, then the work plan, the costs, the timelines, assigning responsibilities, and then guiding and making sure that that's being addressed throughout the implementation of the program or initiative. And of course, the last thing, and I think too often we get really tired at this point, we don't always do it, which is number 10, which is to promote the results. One of the things I wanted to stress, and some of the literature now is really talking about this as outcome harvesting. It's just really taking the time to harvest the results that you have from the different tools that you've used and the different kinds of evaluation that you've put into place. So there's just more information about that and some questions that will help you do the sleuthing that you need to do to harvest your outcomes. Additional information there to help you out if you are designing surveys, things to avoid. I also wanted to make a strong case for the benefits of using stories. I think especially in the work that we do with children and youth, the stories can be extraordinarily powerful, and we want to make sure we collect those. So some information for you about stories and tips for telling stories, and some ideas for evoking stories among your stakeholders. So that's that. A lot of information, a lot of resources for you that we hope will be helpful. I just wanted to leave you with this quote because I thought it was kind of funny that dinosaurs would have a better chance to survive if they had evaluated climate changes a bit more carefully. So just making a case for evaluation. So with that, and with my thanks to RBC and Lynn, I'm going to turn the mic over to Carrie Kelly. Over to you. Carrie, thanks.
Thank you, Brenda, and thank you so much. That was a great presentation. As I said in the beginning, both informative and engaging. I'd also like to take this opportunity again to thank Gail and all of the team at RBC who've joined us today.